We're getting there. We're getting there. Great.
Hey.
Good. Thank you. Yes, Douglas, we would love to hear a wood thrush.
Okay, because that's the bird that he refers to, right?
That's really pretty.
Yeah, so that's what he
Yeah,
was referring to when he talks about the thrush.
that's really pretty. Thank you. Hey, Peter, we're starting. Okay. That's a wood thrush. Yeah.
Right.
And Leslie, hi, Leslie. Would you
I
be willing to be the guest presenter of the Practical Cats
well,
poem?
I wasn't intending for it to be some big production. I just thought people might enjoy seeing another side of Eliot. And I could I think I could hook it up to him reading one or two of them
Yeah,
and just,
that'd be
just make
fine.
a little, maybe 15 minutes worth. Would that
Sure.
be
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Not this time and not next time, but after that.
on a Thursday?
Yeah, so it would be a week from today.
Is that Thanksgiving?
Is it Thanksgiving?
No.
No,
No.
it's the week
Well,
before Thanksgiving.
okay. Yeah, I should be back. That should be
That
good.
would be great. Thank you. That would
Sure.
be great. So hi everybody. It's really absolutely delightful to see everybody. And as you know, I think you got my email that today and next time we're going to talk about four quartets. And then Leslie is going to be our guest presenter of a couple of practical cats, because I don't know those poems, you know. And then we're going to start on William Carlos Williams. And I will do some bio. He has a really interesting bio. And then I'll be preparing some sets of poems for you all. Okay. And Douglas, when we get to Wallace Stevens, I'm going to really rely on you because I think you probably know Stevens quite a bit better than I do. I mean, I've read a bunch of Stevens, but it seems to me like you've really deeply internalized a lot of Stevens-ish stuff, you know, being a fellow New Englander. Yes, great. Okay, so four quartets. So we're gonna,
Anne,
yes, go
Anne,
ahead.
would you like me to show the poems on the screen or not? This is up to you.
Um, do you can you show the PDF?
Uh,
Probably
I
not.
was let's see. I can show yeah, I can. I can show the PDF. So in other words, it doesn't have all the pink and whatever you were talking about.
That pig is ridiculous. I could not make that go away. Yes, like first half, for the first half, the guy was still in his right mind, and then he just lost it, you know?
Well,
Seriously.
so anyway, yes or no, I can
I
do
don't
it
know.
if you
Let's
want.
take a vote. Would you guys rather see the poems or rather see each other?
That's tough.
I'd rather see each
Let me
other. I have poems
I
So
open.
have
rather see each
I have the
other?
poems in a book, so I'm
Okay,
here.
so
in
let's
the
just see if it goes okay to just see each other because I like it when I can see your faces, and I
right.
do have the poems in a book. Um,
Okay.
great. So we'll see, and if that's not working, then you guys just say, you know, okay,
You want me to hold the book? Just gonna
hold
make it
that book.
worse.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're gonna
yeah,
make it
good.
worse.
Okay, so first I wanted to read you a couple of prose, bits. The first is by Eliot from his essay. Um, the use the use of poetry and the use of criticism. It's a book. And this is what I've talked about a couple of times, these saturated images. And this is really important for four quartets as well. I love this passage. Why, for all of us, out of all that we have heard, seen, felt in a lifetime, do certain images recur, charged with emotion rather than others? The song of one bird, the leap of one fish, at a particular place and time, the scent of one flower, an old woman on a German mountain path, six ruffians seen through an open window playing cards at night at a small French railway junction where there was a watermill. Such memories may have symbolic value, but of what we cannot tell, for they come to represent the depths of feeling into which we cannot peer. So, as I'm going to say, I think this passage is a really important enlightening passage for our understanding of what can't be understood in four quartets. Depths of feeling into which we peer, into which we cannot peer. Depths of feeling that lie so deep in us, and we know that they're there, but we can't rationally get at them or explain them. And then another passage is by F.R. Leavis, who is a really important critic of T.S. Eliot. And this is talking about, Leavis says, people either believe in what four quartets are saying or don't believe in it. But he's arguing that we need to have another approach to it in a way. He says, Eliot is known as professing Anglo-Catholicism and classicism, but his poetry is remarkable for the extraordinary resource, penetration, and stamina with which it makes its explorations into the concrete actualities of experience below the conceptual currency, into the life that must be the raison d'etre of any frame, while there is life at all. With all its positive aspiration and movement, it is at the same time essentially a work of radical analysis and revision, endlessly insistent in its care not to confuse the frame with the living reality, and heroic in its refusal to accept. So, I just think that that's useful to keep in mind when we're approaching four quartets, that this is poetry. This is not propaganda. It's not a sermon. Eliot could sermonize at times, but that's not what this is. I would say almost entirely. This is a way of feeling through and thinking through and exploring and struggling toward something. So at the beginning of talking about Eliot, I said that I think of all of his poetry as in a way connected. One thing really leads to another, and his published canon is small, deliberately small. If you have a complete poetry of T.S. Eliot, it's just a book. Whereas, with Wind Call Swims, you'd have to go to like book after book after book after book after book, okay? Because Eliot wrote more than he published. And he kind of combed or pruned, not whatever, pruned his canon to be the way he wanted it to be. Yeah. Okay. So if we think of an arc through his poetry from Prufrock through Little Gidding, we are faced over and over again with iterations of the desire to ask an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Says Prufrock. But now we're coming toward, more or less of a final statement of what that might be. And Leslie was talking about the pole, the axis. Eliot, I think, in these poems is struggling to find the intersection of the timeless with time, otherwise known as the still moment, the moment both in and out of time, the moment of incarnation. So I'm going to look at the poems in that way. The poems were written over a period of years. Eliot did not know when he wrote the first one that he was going to write the last one. The first one, Burnt Norton, is published in 1935. The next one, East Coker, he wrote in 1939 after the war had begun, and he published it in 1940. Dry Salvages, is it 1941?
Published 41.
Published in 1941, and Little Gidding in 1942. So three of these four are written during World War II. Eliot was living in London. He was working as an air raid warden, a volunteer air raid warden for part of that time. He was publishing, going to London during the week to do his publishing work, his editing work, and then for at least a part of this time, going out to the countryside to spend the weekends and work on his poetry and get away from, the bombings. So all of that is very much on his mind, as well as, of course, the eventual end of his marriage to Vivian and his own pretty serious health problems. Peter told me that by the time Eliot died, he had only 3 of his original teeth. He suffered a lot with tooth infection. He suffered with, a hernia. He suffered with a lot of lung problems, viruses, and so on. So the aspect of struggle is pretty strong in these poems, and it's portrayed or it's acted out in a number of different ways. Now, another thing that's really interesting to me is the way the four quartets fit together. Each of them has five parts. Each of them modulates or moves from expository sections to lyrical section and back. In section 5 of each of them, Eliot is writing about writing. He's writing about poetry, and so this is one thing that knits these four quartets together. Some critics have said that these four quartets are like Beethoven's late quartets, that they're really stretching the limits of what can be done with a form. But another thing that's interesting to me, we've got our four elements. Burnt Norton is the poem of air. East Coker is the poem of earth. Dry Salvages is the poem of water. Little Gidding is the poem of fire. And then there's the fifth element, the quincunx, which is that how you say?
Quintessence.
The
Quintessence is
quintessence,
something
the
different.
quintessence of all of them, which is the sacred element, right? And this is what the poem is moving toward by the end. So those are just some of the ways that the poem fits together that I think is really cool. The poem has, the first poem is personal biographical time. The second poem is historical social time. The third poem is earth time, biological time. And the fourth poem is sacramental time. And then something else that's pretty cool too is, what was I going to say? Oh, the epigraph, as you know, is from Heraclitus. The logos is common, the many live as if they had a wisdom of their own. The road up and the road down are the same thing. So that's pretty cool. The universe is in constant flux, constant diversity, but also the material and the non-material world are constantly passing into each other. Okay, so Burnt Norton. Burnt Norton is a place that Eliot visited with his very, very good friend, Emily Hale. She was American. He had a close relationship with her, and I'm not really sure exactly what that close relationship was, because of course he was married to Vivian. Emily, pretty much thought that eventually she was going to marry Eliot. But Eliot, I'm not sure, felt that same way. Anyway, she came to England several summers in a row to stay with her aunt and uncle. And while she was there, she and Eliot visited a lot with each other. And at one point, they went out to this place called Burnt Norton, which is in the Cotswolds. It's a manor house, one critic says, not particularly distinguished, but it's on the site of an earlier house that had burned down. So that's the reference to burnt. Okay, so Burnt Norton, and I'm just going to read you the first passage, which always kind of makes my head spin. Tony's the philosopher, Peter's the philosopher. I'm like, oh my gosh, what does this say? But it's really beautiful. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. What might have been is an abstraction remaining a perpetual possibility only in a world of speculation. What might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. So I think the important lines here are, if all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. The past, the present, the future are all contained in each other. The whole struggle of the poem is to be able to say, if all time is eternally present, all time is redeemed. And it takes, all four poems to get to that point. All time is unredeemable. But then
Can
there's, go ahead.
can I ask you a couple of things? One, just with regard to the pruning, as you called it, of his writings, many writers throughout history have had a lot of posthumous stuff published. I mean, I can think of Copernicus, for example, and Wittgenstein. were
Hmm.
any of his things in other words, did anybody not respect his wishes and go ahead and publish things that he didn't want published? That's one question.
Yeah,
And then the other thing about time is certainly reflective of Augustine and
yeah,
Kierkegaard.
yeah,
Did he study either of those guys,
yeah.
to your
He
knowledge?
studied St. Augustine for sure. And also Bergson, Henri Bergson is often cited as an influence. Eliot said he was influenced by Bergson's thinking about time as flow, you know. Yeah, Peter, you were going to say something about the published works.
Well, my guess about Kierkegaard is that he didn't have that much influence on Eliot because he was such an extreme individualist, and Eliot was moving toward the Anglo-Catholic faith.
Well, it's
Uh,
also possible it wasn't translated. I mean, Kierkegaard wrote in
yeah,
Danish,
that's
so
true. Many of the works had not been translated. Yeah, Walter Lowry translated them, well into Eliot's middle age. The other thing I wanted to say is Christopher Ricks edited a fairly large volume called Inventions of the March Hare, which has early Eliot poems. I've only glanced over it, and I don't think most of them are very good. But I'm not sure that Eliot deliberately said, don't publish these, and he did save them.
Yeah,
So I'm not sure that it was against his wishes, but I think the relatively small complete poems and plays or collected poems and plays contain most of what really, really matters in Eliot and a fair amount that doesn't matter that much, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay.
So then we do as Eliot does, he switches tone and becomes instantly more personal. Footfalls echo in the memory down the passage, which we did not take, toward the door we never opened, into the rose garden. Think again about all the iterations of rose imagery in Eliot. The sacred rose, the multifoliate rose. Here it's a natural place, a rose garden. My words echo thus in your mind. He's speaking to us, he's speaking who knows who. But to what purpose? Disturbing the dust on a bowl of rose leaves, I do not know. Then we turn, other echoes inhabit the garden. And here we're in the presence of these saturated images. Perhaps from childhood, shall we follow? Quick, said the bird, find them, round the corner, through the first gate, into our first world, which is both childhood and Eden. Shall we follow the deception of the thrush? Into our first world, there they were, dignified, invisible, moving without pressure over the dead leaves in the autumn heat through the vibrant air. Who's they? The original parents, the biographical parents, archetypal figures. We don't know, but it's so evocative, okay? And the bird called in response to the unheard music hidden in the shrubbery and the unseen ivy crossed, for the roses had the look of flowers that are looked at. So we're in the presence of something noumenal here, something very mysterious and strange. And Eliot can't completely articulate what is that, but we know that we're in this charged atmosphere. There they were as our guests, accepted and accepting. So we moved and they in a formal pattern along the empty alley into the box circle to look down into the drained pool. Lots of imagery of patterning and dancing all through the quartets. Now the pool's empty, but all of a sudden there's this miraculous thing that happens. And the pool was filled with water out of sunlight, and the lotus rose quietly, quietly. The surface glittered out of heart of light. And there they were behind us, reflected in the pool. Then a cloud passed, and the pool was empty. So here's this timeless moment, this Pentecostal moment. And then the moment passes, and the pool is empty. Brian?
Um, Allow me to express a physicist's objection to the nature of this reflection. Um, if I was standing at the edge of a pool and they were behind me, I wouldn't see their reflection. The only way I would do that is if I were hovering over the pool. So I'm not quite sure what's going on, but this is a miraculous pool filled with light.
Yeah,
And I suppose that light can do anything it wants.
yeah.
Um, so that's my minor objection.
That's very cool. Very good. Eliot was not a physicist. That's good though. Go, said the bird, for the leaves were full of children, hidden excitedly containing laughter. Go, 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 said the bird. Humankind cannot bear very much reality. Time past and time future, what might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. So we have this movement that soars briefly into something very strange, full of fullness, full of plenitude, full of miracle, and then it fades away. Go, said the bird, humankind cannot bear very much reality. So we're back with our feet on the ground with this kind of sadness about time. Leslie?
Um, I have recently read for the first time The Secret Garden.
Uh-huh.
Never read when I was a kid, but I'm reading it I read to people at an elder care place. And
Uh-huh.
some of them have been retarded all their lives, so you have to choose your stuff pretty carefully. But this reminds me a little bit of, because it's so important in that to have this walled garden where there has been an earlier history
Yeah.
where you sort of know who they were, but you just get hints about the situation, and a magical bird who flies in and basically reveals it, to the younger generation. Because again, we have this they, and who's they? But I was thinking, if he was, I think when he was there looking at Burton Norton, they mainly walked through the gardens.
Mhm.
There might have been an empty pool or something, and maybe he's thinking about all the days that ever looked there
Mhm.
and that were ever looking at that place when it did have water. And that it's related to the time going way, way back, all the moments of people where
Yeah.
there were children, so he's hearing these echoes of voices and seeing a visual echo of what happened before.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, of course, when he was a little kid, he lived next door to the Mary Institute, which was this school in St. Louis, and he would hear the voices of the children playing in the playground. And that seems to be part of it too. Douglas.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that roses and walled gardens and rose gardens were all important Sufi images. And he may have been exposed to that because of, the British Empire and all that stuff.
Could have been, yeah. I'm gonna have to do some skipping, because we'll never ever get through two poems. We could spend forever, and then everybody would rebel and say no more four quartets. So the second part of the second section is again kind of philosophical, and he's trying to elaborate what that still point would be at the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless. This is that not this, not that, the way of defining God by not this, not that. What is it? Neither from nor towards. At the still point, there the dance is, but neither arrest nor movement. So dance is a really important trope for a poet like Eliot and a poet like Yeats, because what dance is movement which is beautiful, movement which is orderly, movement which is full of significance and patterned. So the dance is neither arrest nor movement. So it's completely paradoxical. Do not call it fixity where past and future are gathered, neither movement from nor toward, neither ascent nor decline. Except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. So the dance is the movement, what, around this axis pole, around this still point. I can only say, there we have been. So he's testifying, there we have been. But I can't say where. And I can't say how long, for that is to place it in time. And then he goes on trying to define it further. the inner freedom from practical desire, the release from action and suffering, release from the inner and outer compulsion, yet surrounded by a grace of sense, a white light still and moving, Erhebung, which means lifting up or exaltation without motion, concentration without elimination, both the new world and the old, made explicit, understood in the completion of its partial ecstasy, the resolution of its partial horror. And skipping a little, time past and time future allow but a little consciousness. To be conscious is not to be in time, but only in time can the moment in the rose garden, the moment in the arbor where the rain beat, the moment in the drafty church as smoke fall be remembered, involved with past and future. Only through time and is conquered. And then we have this movement descend lower into the world of perpetual solitude, world, not world, but that which is not world, internal darkness. This is the one way movement, the other abstention from movement, right? And we got this image of the empty souls being driven like bits of chaff or bits of lint whirled by the cold wind along the trains, along the trams, driven on the wind that sweeps the gloomy hills of London. But instead of that, descend lower into a kind of dark night of the soul. This is the one way, and the other is the same, not in movement, but abstention from movement. We have a really beautiful little lyric. Time and the bell have buried the day. The black cloud carries the sun away. Will the sunflower turn to us? Will the clematis stray down, bend to us? Tendril and spray clutch and cling. Till fingers of you be curled down on us. After the kingfisher's wing has answered light to light and is silent, the light is still at the still point of the turning world. So asking these questions, will this grace come down upon us? Will this beauty be ours? And then section 5 about writing. Words move, music moves only in time, but that which is only living can only die. And this is a cool thing about poetry. Words after speech reach into the silence. And the tiny star still moves perpetually in its stillness. And then more and more and more talking about words, the struggle to use words, how they strain, they crack, they don't hold still. It's hard to say what you mean. And then to finally finish section, the Burnt Norton, the detail of the pattern is movement, as in the figure of the 10 stairs. Here we're back with this imagery of the stairs, climbing the stairs, St. John of the Cross, ecstasy and despair of movement along the stairs. Desire itself is movement, not in itself desirable. Love is itself unmoving, only the cause and end of movement, timeless and undesiring except in the aspect of time, caught in the form of limitation between unbeing and being. A recap of the first section, sudden in a shaft of sunlight. Even while the dust moves, there rises the hidden laughter of children in the foliage. Quick now, here, now, always. Ridiculous, the way sad time, stretching before and after. So again, that quick now, here now, always is going to be repeated verbatim at the end of Little Gidding, but with a profound transformation. Okay. So any questions before we zoom on to East Coker? Any statements or observations about Burnt Norton? Leslie?
Well, that thing I tried to send everybody,
Oh, cool.
it just shows the center still point. This is a time lapse shot of the stars around the North Pole. But I think he was trying hard to think of a visual image that was sort of archetypal for this place. It's said on this article, which I'm sorry caused so much trouble sending it. It's at the center of the whole celestial dance and is the logical seat for the conductor. So you put Christ right there in that center, where everything is moving, all that time you were talking about in real life is moving around constantly in this pattern. But the center, which is where the axle tree comes through and turns the whole thing, is unmoving totally.
Moving. Yeah. God is the unmoved mover. Yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. And Mircea Eliade talks about the sacred and the profane, and he says the profane is horizontal and the sacred is vertical. You know, it's a really interesting book. Um, Other observations about Burnt Norton? Yeah, Douglas.
Yeah, in the the second section where he's talking about how he can't say, it's like he can't say anything about where he's been, that sort of thing. There's a Sufi story about a town that it was surrounded with a wall, and everybody had everything they needed, but every once in a while somebody would climb the wall and disappear, and this kind of was disconcerting to the leaders of the town. So they would observe these people, and they noticed that when they got to the top of the wall, their faces were transformed with delight, and then they would disappear over the wall. So they waited for this person they figured was one of these people who was dissatisfied and was going to try the wall. And when he got to the top of the wall, they grabbed him and pulled him back. And they demanded that he tell them what he had seen, but he'd lost the power of speech.
That's pretty cool. That's a really cool story. Wow. So East Coker. So Eliot's people obviously were from England. Eliot was related to Sir Thomas Eliot, who wrote the Book of the Governor, which is a Renaissance treatise on courtly behavior. And he was also related to, wasn't he related to somebody associated with the Salem witch trials? I think he had an ancestor
I
associated
don't
with
know
that.
about that.
Yeah, but he had come, his people had come from East Coker in Somerset. Eliot's ashes are buried at East Coker in Somerset, although he has also a stone in Westminster Abbey in Poets' Corner. Um, so East Coker is a poem about history, it's a poem about familial history, and it's a poem about time as history and the agony of history, the agony of birth and death, the agony of death and birth. Its epigraph, in my beginning is my end, actually, its first line, turns on its head. Mary, Queen of Scots's epigraph is en ma fin, in my end, et mon commencement is my beginning. In my end is my beginning, you know, which is a good thing to say if they chop your head off, right? And Eliot, that's the last line of Eliot's poem too. In my end is my beginning. So again, there's this kind of turning on its head that takes place during the course of the poem. In my beginning is my end. In succession, houses rise and fall, crumble, are extended, are removed, destroyed, restored, or in their place is an open field or a factory or a bypass. Old stone to new building, old timbers to new fires, old fires to ashes, and ashes to the earth, which is already flesh, fur, and feces, bone of man and beast, cornstalk and leaf. Houses live and die. There is a time for building and a time for living and for generation, and a time for the wind to break loose in pain and to shake the wainscot where the field mouse trots, and to shake the tattered arras woven with the silent motto. Eliot's family's motto was be silent and act. In my beginning is my end. Now the light falls across the open field, leaving the deep lane shuttered with branches, dark in the afternoon. So this English countryside, the one-lane roads, the hedges on either side, and you're going into a village. And then that's all very realistic. That's actually very realistic, that first section of the poems. But then it turns kind of magical. It's like hallucinatory. In that open field, if you do not come too close, if you do not come too close on a summer midnight, you can hear the music of the weak pipe and the little drum and see them dancing around the bonfire. And this is taken exactly from the Book of the Governor, the association of man and woman in dancing, signifying matrimony, a dignified and commodious sacrament. So here again, the dance. But here it's a It's a carnal dance. It's a secular dance, except that it's the sacrament of marriage, but it's people doing this dancing around a bonfire. Two and two necessary conjunction, holding each other by the hand or the arm, which betokeneth concord. Great lines, you know. Round and round the fire, leaping through the flames, or joined in circle, rustically solemn, or in rustic laughter, lifting heavy feet in clumsy shoes, earth feet, lone feet, lifted in country mirth, mirth of those long since under earth nourishing the corn, keeping time, keeping the rhythm in their dancing, as in their living, in the living seasons, the time of the seasons, in the constellations, the time of milking and the time of harvest, the time of the coupling of man and woman and that of beast, feet rising and falling, eating and drinking, dung and death. So we end on kind of a grim note. It's like all of this harmonious living in the body, this celebratory bonfire, the dancing and so on, ends nonetheless with dung and death. Dawn points and another day prepares for heat and silence. And then out at sea, it's almost as if Eliot is precognition of the dry sob ages. The dawn wind wrinkles and slides. I am here or there or elsewhere in my beginning. I'm going to skip the lyric because I need to move a little faster. And then we have some thinking about the fact that he thinks the poem he just wrote is not very good. And I have to say, I agree. That was a way of putting it, not very satisfactory. A paraphrastic study in a worn-out poetical fashion, leaving one still with the intolerable wrestle with words and meanings. The poetry doesn't matter. It was not to start again what one had expected. And then he's talking about growing old. What was to be the value of the long looked forward to, long hoped for calm, the autumnal serenity and the wisdom of age? Had they deceived us or deceived themselves? He says, there is, it seems to us, at best only a limited value in the knowledge derived from experience, because the knowledge imposes a pattern and falsifies, for the pattern is new in every moment, and every moment is a new and shocking valuation of all we have been. So we get lost, and he's referring here, he loves Sherlock Holmes, he's referring to the Grimpen, the dark wood, and he's referring to Dante getting lost in the woods in the middle of the way, you know, and all these things. We get snarled up, we get tangled up. We think we're going to gain wisdom as we get old, but we don't gain wisdom, we just get old, you know. And he says, every moment is a new and shocking valuation of all that we have been. Do not let me hear of the wisdom of old men, but rather of their folly, their fear and frenzy, their fear of possession, of belonging to another or to others or to God. The only wisdom we can hope to acquire is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless. And then we have another descent into the darkness. Oh, dark, dark, dark. And this is both, you know, death under the earth in your grave, but also this meaningful turning away from the world of visible and created things into the darkness of God. I said to my soul, be still and let the dark come upon you, which shall be the darkness of God. Skipping some. I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope. For hope would be hope for the wrong thing. Wait without love, for love would be love of the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but the faith and love and the hope are all in the waiting. Wait without thought, for you are not ready for thought. So the darkness shall be the light, and the stillness the dancing. And again, these saturated images whisper of running streams and winter lightning, the wild time unseen, and the wild strawberry, the laughter in the garden, echoed ecstasy, not lost, but requiring, pointing to the agony of death and birth. I think it's really beautiful. It's like this deliberate telling of the soul to be still, not to hope, not to love, not to think even, because you don't know yet what it is that you're supposed to be hoping for, loving, or thinking about. but you've got these images that are so beautiful that come up. These images from the past, these images from nature, the wild thyme, the strawberry, the garden. And gardens are always images of completeness and beauty and richness, fertility, but also images of enclosure, the hortus conclusus, the enclosed garden, which is, the place where all love ends, right? And more from St. John of the Cross, more from Heraclitus. In order to arrive at what you are not, you must go through the way in which you are not. And what you do not know is the only thing you know. And what you own is what you do not own. And where you are is where you are not. Section 5, talking about language again. So here I am in the middle way, echoing Dante, having had 20 years. 20 years largely wasted. The years of l'entre-deux-guerres. So World War I, World War II. Trying to learn to use words in every attempt is a wholly new start and a different kind of failure, because one has only learned to get the better of words for the thing one no longer has to say, or the way one is no longer disposed to say it. And so each venture is a new beginning, a raid on the inarticulate, with shabby equipment always deteriorating in the general mess of imprecision of feeling. Undisciplined squads of emotion. And what there is to conquer by strength and submission has already been discovered once or twice or several times by men whom one cannot hope to emulate. But there is no competition. I think that discipline, the self-disciplining that's going into these poetry is really remarkable. Trying to think through, like, you've worked so hard for 20 years, the years between two wars, to try to learn how to use words. When you manage to use them, you already kind of used that up. You did that, and now you need to find something else. And it's natural to envy other great poets for what they could do, but he says there is no competition. There is only the fight to recover what has been lost and found and lost again and again. And now, under conditions that seem unpropitious, but perhaps neither gain nor loss. For us, there's only the trying. The rest is not our business. So conditions that seem unpropitious would include the war, trying to write during wartime, trying to write during what Eliot felt was the complete breakdown of culture. And for Eliot, also the complete secularization of culture, turning toward false gods, turning toward idols and mammon, turning toward empty lives, hurried to and fro on the tram, on the trains, on the buses, whirled about like bits of fluff. But still, this discipline to be able to write poetry. Home is where one starts from. As we grow older, the world becomes stranger, the pattern more complicated of dead and living. Not the intense moment isolated with no before and after, which is what happened in Burnt Norton, that intense moment, but a lifetime burning in every moment. And not the lifetime of one man only, but of old stones that cannot be deciphered. That's the goal, this kind of saint-like goal. There is a time for the evening under starlight, a time for the evening under lamplight, the evening with the photographed album. Love is most nearly itself when here and now cease to matter. Old men ought to be explorers, which I think is a really great line. Here and there does not matter. We must be still and still moving into another intensity for a further union, a deeper communion through the dark cold and the empty desolation, the wave cry, the wind cry, the vast waters of the Petro and the Porpoise. In my end is my beginning. So this modulates right into dry salvages. Eliot probably, he knew that he was going to be working on the next one already, the water poem. Now, Coker, this great poem about his own family's past, the past of England, the village past, the communal past, and the past when community, at least as expressed by its rituals and by what was written about it, seemed deeply organized and patterned and rich and fertile in a way that it seems to Eliot is not the case any longer. Um, Comments? Want to talk about this poem? We've got some time. Oh, I better keep the book open.
Well, there was that bit about expecting to get wise in old age, and then having it not happen. You ever hear? It's kind of a common thing. You ask an old man, "Well, what's the secret to your longevity, or your life, or your happiness, or your marriage?" And the answer is always a cliche that you could have said when you were 18. And yet you go, oh yes, that is very wise. But actually it's just some bland thing. And I'm reminded of that idea that I of the tarot reading or something. I think it was when I was talking about the symposium, and it was anyway. Um, if you really have a question for the old man or the old woman, if you're really troubled in your heart and you ask them something and they tell you a cliche, it'll seem like wisdom. Uh, and and yet it's no different from something anybody could have said when they were 25. And I like that idea that you don't ever really get wise. I think Sophocles said, uh, Peter's so good at this stuff. Sophocles said in one of the plays that wisdom, until it lasts in old age or wise, or some line like that, I think is in Sophocles. And that's just, at least in my case, disappointingly not true.
What, that you don't get wise as you get older?
Yeah, I don't notice it. I think I'm just as dumb as I was when I was 15. I've just read a lot of books and been a lot of places, but that
Yeah,
doesn't make you wise. What does that mean?
yeah. I know. I
Anyway,
think,
I like that little passage.
yeah. It's like a thing that people tell themselves to comfort themselves because their bodies are falling apart.
Exactly.
They have
Exactly.
to face the grave. It's like, well, at least I'm wise.
And then
No,
everybody else that's younger patronizes them and says, "Oh yes, that's very wise. You poor old sap."
yeah,
But we'll give you your fantasy of wisdom. We'll defer to your wish to be thought of as wise.
that's
I
funny.
don't know. Maybe the rest of you have gotten wise. I don't want to insult anyone. It just hasn't happened to me. Hasn't happened to me.
That's funny. Go
Well,
ahead.
it's one of those, when you say to yourself, "Oh, I'll never make that mistake again." And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know. I'm perfectly capable of doing that again.
Or
You know,
if I
I
could, I would.
that's right. But it's sort of that he strongly says, "Well, what was my last 20 years for? What was, you know, he really senses that he's really searching, and he isn't, and all the things he's been told, all the things he's done, all the things he's done, haven't got him there yet." Is that? I mean, I'm feeling that a lot, and I think that falling what Tony's saying is like, you know, getting older didn't change anything. We're still struggling.
Yeah, 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 Laurel.
Yeah, I mean, I think even professionally, I like what he has to say about poetry, that he's learned how to write certain things that he no longer needs to write.
Mhm.
And I feel like I've learned how to solve certain problems in research or whatever that I no longer need to do, that they're so, looking back, you can say, well, okay. But I also really like the sort of imagery, as Leslie said, that I think a lot of the children's stories,
Yeah,
this imagery of someplace special and secret and memories of sort of the laughter and the joys, and it is something you carry with you. It's still there.
yeah,
And
yeah,
maybe that's part of what you knew when you were a child, but you have, sorry, you haven't gotten all that much wiser about it. But now you know something about it. Now that you no longer can be a child laughing in the little garden. But
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that the laughter is magical, but the children who are laughing are just beyond reach.
Yeah.
And even in the early experience, they were just beyond reach. Everything is somehow just beyond reach, but still touches on transcendence.
Yeah. And you can hear them. And you know
But
they're
well, you have that, as you said, the saturated experience is sort of it's the only really tangible thing he keeps coming back to. I mean, am I right? You know, in terms of the imagery, he struggles with words and thoughts and moving. But when he comes back to those real simple images of the children, of the gardens and stuff, and he just keeps coming, and that's kind of like the nice resting point for this, or at least it's the one kind of you know what is it? Saturated. It's the one that's really resonates.
Mhm. And think back to the wasteland, that image of the hyacinth girl, um, when something happens in the hyacinth garden, I could not move, I could not speak, and that's a similar mysterious moment of incredible beauty, the meaning of which is not really known. Later, Eliot in Fort Cortez is going to say, we had the experience but missed the meaning. You know, it's like this thing has happened, um, but we don't yet know what it signifies. Um, yeah, absolutely. So he does keep coming back to those few images, those really beautiful images of, and they're all natural images, but they're transformed into images of the sacred.
And there's that
Isn't
same
it
phrase, heart of light
Yeah,
in the wasteland and
yeah,
in
the heart of
Fort
light.
Cortez.
isn't it kind of weird that maybe it's just me, but there are certain things that you could never have expected would be images
Hmm.
or recollections that stay with you profoundly throughout your whole life. And yet, when you have them, you never would have guessed that they'd have that kind of resonance throughout your whole life. The children playing is one of them. I suspect we all have some kind of image that conjures up specific. In other words, it's not just his image, but one that it resonates with us. But isn't it odd that you can't? I mean, it's at least true of me that I'll have images that are just somehow so vibrant and stay with you forever, and yet when you had them, you didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
And
That's a weird thing.
that's the whole point, because in a sense they're magical. Um, yeah, the whole point is that you don't know. You can't say, I'm having a peak experience here. It's like a little random thing and you'll never forget it. And you don't really know why or what it means, but it's just that it's there. Yeah, Leslie?
Well, two things. One, Tony, how many really old people have you had lengthy conversations with? As so I got this certificate in gerontology, so I spend a lot of time with very old people, including my mother-in-law who was 101 when she died, and my aunt who was 102, and some good friends who were 102. And a lot depends on how your mind's doing at that stage, because like my aunt was totally delusional. But my friend Frida Thorlaxon had all her marbles to the very, very end. And she was full of wisdom. I used to write for the newspaper and I would interview her and get all sorts of wisdom from her. And my other friend, Dottie Sweeney down the street, who would say things. Um, we all sort of adopted Dottie. She'd be up on her roof blowing the leaves off when she was 98.
Jeez.
And but she would say these really wise things that I maybe hadn't even figured out yet. So I think it depends on who you're talking to, how long you're talking to them, how deeply you're talking to them.
Okay, well, I'll just have to confess that all my friends are idiots, and that's the kind of people I've collected around me. I'm not including any of you in that, but but
But
anyway,
not over
Leslie,
yet.
But Leslie, the thing that has to occur to me is what is wisdom? And I'm just going to be a broken record and say, how did you know it was wise? And that's Meno's paradox. You said she'd say something that was really wise. Well, wouldn't you have to understand that in order to recognize that it was wise? So
I
aren't you already wise?
I actually have. No, it's a evolutionary process, of course. But I think for me, the wisdom is this gradual pattern of breaking out of your ego boundaries and absorbing of spreading out so that you are connected to everybody and everything in a way. And that was seemed to be one of the basic sources of wisdom is this sense of attachment to everything. So anyway, for that. But the other thing I wanted to say quickly was about the Secret Garden came as a revelation to me because I hadn't read it as a kid and I had just heard about it. But it's a fascinating book that if you have, how many people have read The Secret Garden? Okay,
I've
as adults.
didn't
Okay.
read it.
So it's about these really damaged kids. You know, there's one sane, healthy family, and they're living in total poverty on the moors, and they're attached to nature and everything. But the other kids are totally damaged, and they come into this secret garden where a death had happened 10 years before, and the garden has been allowed to die, pretty much. It appears to be dead. And the other adults in the story are so damaged they don't have any connection with the children. The children have to have raised themselves, and when they show up, they're miserable. And this thing which they identify as magic happens in the garden as they work on it and they regenerate it and of course being written when it was it has to do with fresh air from the moors and exercise and eating your porridge and all that good stuff, but it's about transformation, and in the end the children save the adults. So anyway, it's not just a kid's book.
That's really good. Laurel.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with Leslie. You should read the book. It's a lovely, lovely book, and it works for grown-ups too. But I was going to say one of the things I wonder, Leslie, when you talk about the wisdom of these people is, were they also wise when they were younger? Because I'm thinking of my seventh grade teacher who lived to be 93 and was a dear friend all those years and was one of the wisest people I know. And was wise when he was a young man teaching my class. And I think that may have grown in richness over the years, but one of his gifts was seeing people for who they were and caring, sort of being open to that. And I have a number of friends these days, uppercase friends, of older Quakers who range in age from their 70s into 100 and something, 103, I think, at this point. And I think one of them was on our clearness committee when Dan and I got married in her 90s. And they impress me with their wisdom, part of which consists of asking the right questions and listening. And so it's not just that they have answers, but they have questions and they help you to think, to be more open. They sort of open your mind and heart, and that kind of patience, perhaps, may have grown over the years that I have known them. But
I guess,
Laurel, just briefly, is that you said capital F friends? Is that a Quaker's term?
yeah.
yeah, so they're Quakers I know. So our community of friends, of uppercase friends, is aging. I
That's
mean,
the name of the Quakers is the Society of the Friends of Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, I know that, but I'm asking, do I get to be a uppercase friend, or do I have to be a Quaker to be an uppercase
Yeah,
friend?
you're a little F friend.
Okay,
Little F friend.
I'm happy with that.
I guess I just wanted to say quickly, I can hear you guys what you're saying, but I think partly what Elliot is saying is it's very dangerous to think of oneself as wise, because that can get into all kinds of preening and false consciousness and so on. And he's after other game there. It's like there could be people in the world that struck you as wise who offered wisdom. And I'm sure Elliot's own spiritual counselors offered him what he considered to be wisdom. But it's like you can't think, oh, now I've arrived. Now I'm wise. Now I know the answers. It's like a different kind of process and struggle and self-purification than that. Douglas and Barry, Douglas, whoever.
Barry, go ahead, Barry.
So I keep coming back to this whole thing about time in this poem, that the past, the present, and the future all exist simultaneously. And if that's true, and he's speculating around that, then that means that all notions of progress are kind of ephemeral, that you don't really get anywhere because everything and that anything you might articulate has already been articulated. And even by the attempt to articulate something, the minute you try to put words to something, you've already it's already no longer meaningful and deeply meaningful. And he says at the end that the one thing that isn't that it seems to transcend time is humility, which is sort of kind of what you guys are all saying, that it's like, and I think here's a guy who's, a really brilliant man who's seen the ravages of World War One, and that certainly indicates that maybe human existence hasn't made much progress, and sees his own body deteriorating in ill health. So and kind of wondering about his capabilities, questioning the value of his own writing, the things that he's written, are they of any consequence? He kind of likens them to just raising dust on something. I mean, is he really saying something new or not? So I think this time, once he starts to speculate and accept this notion that time is omnipresent and there is no past, present, and future, that really calls him to question everything about what he's doing, what he's done, and what he has to say. And I think it's probably leading him to some sort of a seeking of some transcendent religious kind of explanation to sort of make all this stuff make sense.
Yep.
But how old was he when he wrote this?
Early 50s.
Yeah, I mean, he died in what, the 60s? I mean, not his 60s, but
76 when he
Yeah, he
died.
died.
he was 76 in 65 or the mid 60s he died. So
Yep.
he wasn't really at the end of life when he's writing this stuff.
No, but he'd been through a lot. He was one of these people who was old before he was young.
They say that about Wordsworth too.
And Yeats said it about himself. Uh,
See?
there's a Yeats poem that gives a very sardonic take on the coming of wisdom with time, which is the title of the poem. Though leaves are many, the root is one. Through all the lying days of my youth, I swayed my leaves and flowers in the sun. Now I may wither into the truth.
That's so great to have Peter just come up with these quotes. I mean, my God, I wish I could do that.
Yeah. So we've got Deborah and Brian. Go ahead, one of you.
Oh, I forgot my hand was up. The conversation has moved past it a little bit, but I was thinking I was listening to Barry really, and also Tony, what you said about when you have these peak experiences, at the time you don't know they're peak experiences. And I read something once that you scientists might know about, but a lot of times peak experiences, both negative and positive, are correlated with either endorphins or cortisol. We get excited negatively or positively, and so we're kind of outside of time. When you're in immediate danger, there's no time, there's just survival. When you're in ecstasy, there's no time, there's just ecstasy. And then that wears off, and years later you remember, God, that was great that night I was with Fred, or geez, why did that horrible experience happen to me in the barn, and why do I remember it? And somehow that's correlated with a loss of the awareness of time, which is sort of what happens when you get old. You're kind of not in a hurry and you can think about things. And I just am wondering if somehow, between the in-breath and the out-breath is, yeah, the religious experience. And if that's kind of what Eliot wisely at age 50 was looking for. I don't know, but it's intriguing to me that he, you know, humility is endless. And yet he also says humankind cannot bear very much of reality. Like, who needs the real reflection in the pool when I just as soon make it up? So it's pretty, I don't know, sophisticated approach to revelation or something. I don't understand it completely, but it's pretty interesting.
He didn't understand it completely.
No.
I mean, I'm saying that seriously. He didn't understand it completely.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
didn't.
No, he didn't claim to. Yeah, Brian?
I will again offer a physicist's speculation on the nature of time. Um, no one in physics ever knows what time is. Time cannot be explained. The only thing you can do with time is measure it. If you have a stopwatch, then you can compare two durations, but you can't define time without using synonyms which also require a stopwatch.
Hmm.
Now, Eliot does not have a stopwatch, but he's after aspects of time that aren't really connected with measurement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
and this, I think, accounts for some of my impatience with reading this material.
Oh, are you impatient with it? I would
Yeah,
think
I have to read it, reread it, and then I have to understand that there's a great deal of text that I'm not reading because it's not on the page.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. But I would just think that as a musician, you'd be totally into how he's talking about pattern and, you know, all of that. The whole kind of artistry of what he's talking about.
Uh,
Yes, I respond to that, but I'm also, as a composer, looking for things that I can set to music.
Mm,
And
yeah,
yeah,
I struggle with that here. There are lyrical portions that invite that, but they don't speak directly enough so that a singer could convey them, nor an audience
yeah.
understand them.
John,
I,
you guys know who John Fahey was, right? The
yeah.
guitarist. He did this really beautiful whole album about four quartets,
Hmm.
proven on four quartets. It's really
Fahey did.
I have a couple of things. First of all, I'm also, I guess, a musician. I mean, and I don't like to talk about it at all. I think everything I hear about it is nonsense. It's just bullshit that somebody's trying to pump themselves up and pretend they understand what's going on. I just avoid all kinds of actually explanations of I could give you examples, but it means nothing to me. And then second, going back to what Deborah said about peak experiences, my point was they're not peak experiences. Where'd she go? Oh, there she is.
He's right.
Um, not at all. I mean, I remember I have intent or very clear remembrances of things that there wasn't anything special about them. That was what
Yeah.
my point was.
Oh, I see.
And yet I'm sure I've had very peak experiences that I don't really remember that much, both
Yeah.
negative and positive.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess my point is that memory and time are often correlated with physiology,
Uh-huh.
and we don't really know why the brain remembers what it remembers. I don't know. I don't know. I like out of time experiences personally.
Douglas.
Yeah, so I just was kind of the end is my beginning, but when you were at the very beginning, you were talking about quintessence,
Hmm.
and quintessence was an alchemical
Hmm.
term, and it was the fifth
Yeah.
distillation
Hmm.
working toward the philosopher's stone. So I just thought I was glad you used that word.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna have to go. I have a doctor's appointment pretty soon. Talk about being in time. And before that, I have to have a shot, a very nasty shot to build bone. But I really think you guys are great. And thank you for being here. And next time we'll talk about dry salvages and little gidding. Okay? All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. See you guys.
Bye.
Take
Thank you
care.
all.